All right, let's jump right in. For centuries, there's been this tiny island right in the middle of the Pacific that's been hiding one of history's biggest mysteries. Hundreds of giant stone statues, the Moai, just standing there, watching over a land where the people who built them seem to just disappear.
So yeah, this is the story of Rapa Nui, what we call Easter Island. And in this explainer, we're going to travel back in time. We're going to look at the incredible rise of the Rapa Nui people, their absolutely mind-blowing engineering skills, and then dig into the huge debate over what or who caused their society to collapse.
Okay, first things first. To really get the story of Rapa Nui, you have to understand just how incredibly alone it is. Seriously, it's this tiny dot of volcanic rock plunked down in the middle of the massive Pacific Ocean. It's one of the most remote places on Earth that people have ever lived.
To put that into perspective for you, it's over 3,500 kilometers to the nearest continent. Just try to wrap your head around that. Imagine traveling that far in a canoe with nothing but the stars to show you the way. It's just amazing.
Well, that unbelievable journey was made around the year 1200 by some of the greatest sailors the world has ever known, the Polynesians. They made this island their home, and they built a really complex society based on clans. They figured out how to grow crops, which let their population boom. And it's this thriving new culture that started one of the most incredible art projects in human history.
And that brings us to the island's most famous residents, those silent, giant statues we call the Moai. I mean, these things are Rapa Nui, and they are an absolute monument to the islanders' genius.
Over about 500 years, the Rapa Nui people carved and set up almost 900 of these massive statues all over the island. Just think about that for a second. That's like finishing almost 2 statues every single year for centuries. And these things were not small. The biggest one they ever managed to get up onto a platform, a Moai called Paro, weighed an incredible 82 tons. That's about as much as a dozen elephants. How on earth did they move something that huge?
Now, here's the number that really gets me. It's the number of wheels, or large animals, or even metal tools the Rapa Nui had to help them. A big fat 0. Nothing. Everything you see was done with stone tools, human power, and just pure, brilliant ingenuity.
So, it's so important to remember, these weren't just statues. The Moai were seen as the living, breathing essence of their deified ancestors. They were put on these special stone platforms called ahu, always with their backs to the ocean so they could watch over the villages and protect their descendants with their spiritual power, their mana.
And the very last step in bringing one to life was deeply spiritual. Once they placed these beautiful coral eyes into the eye sockets, the statue was believed to be alive. It became an aringa ora, which means a living face, truly channeling the spirit of that ancestor.
You know, the question of how they moved them has stumped people for ages. There were all these theories about rolling them on logs, but the Rapa Nui's own stories say the Moai walked to their platforms. And what's amazing is that recent experiments have shown this might be literally true. By tying ropes and rocking a statue from side to side, you can actually shuffle it forward. You know, kind of like when you move a heavy fridge across the kitchen floor.
But then, it all just stopped. Sometime in the 1600s, the carving just stopped. The quarries were left with half-finished statues, and the incredible society that built them just fell apart. So, what happened? This is where the story of Easter Island turns into a real-life and very controversial mystery.
For decades, the main theory you'd hear was ecocide. This idea that the islanders just recklessly cut down all their trees to move statues, which led to war and starvation, a self-inflicted wound. But now, a much more complicated picture is emerging, one that suggests other forces, some tiny and some brutally human, played a huge part in the collapse.
Okay, let's talk about culprit number 1, the Polynesian rat. It basically hitched a ride with the first settlers, and with no natural enemies, its population exploded. These rats loved to eat the nuts of the island's giant palm trees, which meant the forests just couldn't grow back. Now, the rats didn't cause all the deforestation, but they sure made it permanent.
Then came the second, and maybe the most horrific blow. In the 1860s, slave raiders from Peru showed up. They violently kidnapped over a third of the island's entire population. And they specifically took the chiefs and the elders, the very people who held all the community's history and knowledge. When a few of the survivors were finally returned, they brought smallpox back with them, and it just tore through the people who were left. The slave raids, the disease, it was an absolute catastrophe.
By 1877, the population had plummeted from thousands down to just 111 people. A whole culture was pushed right to the edge of extinction.
But the story of Rapa Nui doesn't actually end there. It's not just the story of collapse. In fact, what happens next is an incredible story of survival and resilience against all odds.
From that all-time low of just 111 people, the Rapa Nuis somehow held on. Today, thousands of their descendants live on the island. They're working so hard to bring back their language, protect their sacred places, and carry their ancestors' traditions into the future. The island is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and those stoic Moai have become icons known all over the world. They're not just relics of a lost past anymore. They're a powerful symbol of human creativity, of how fragile our ecosystems can be, and really of the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. So the story of Rapa Nui, a story of isolation, of unbelievable achievement, of environmental disaster, and a near extinction followed by a rebirth, it leaves us with a really important question. In a world that's facing its own complicated problems, what lessons can this lost world, with its powerful echoes carved in stone, teach our own?